In the sweltering summer of 1878, when typhoid fever swept through Harper County, Kansas, and claimed 47 lives, 4 brothers named Blackwood walked away untouched. Their strange resistance to the disease defied every medical expectation. Yet what looked like divine favor soon revealed itself as something far more unsettling. What happened to the Blackwoods disturbed doctors so deeply that 3 physicians refused to sign their names to the reports, and the Kansas State Medical Board locked away every record connected to the case. What began as protection turned into transformations so grotesque that even the local Methodist congregation erased the family from their church rolls, burning every trace of their name. The brothers began showing signs that no physician could classify, symptoms that edged further away from anything human. By the first snows of winter, frightened neighbors whispered that the Blackwoods no longer cast natural shadows, that their speech carried strange harmonics that left ears bleeding, and that their eyes gleamed like predators in the night. The last surviving medical note, still sealed from public viewers, said to have concluded with a single chilling line: "Subjects have surpassed all human biological definition." Nearly 150 years later, the story has never been officially acknowledged. But tonight, we're going to break that silence and ask why modern science still shies away from the truth of what happened on that lonely Kansas farm. Because perhaps what the Blackwood brothers became was more horrifying than any ghost tale. But before we go further, I have to ask, this channel isn't for the faint of heart. If you count yourself among the few willing to face the stories others bury, make sure you subscribe and tell me in the comments what city or state you're listening from. The question is, are you brave enough to learn what really happened when faith and medicine collided on the prairie? Let's return now to 1878, Cedar Ridge. Kansas wasn't much more than a scatter of homes along wagon roads, a place of wheat fields, cattle pastures, and barely 300 residents. It was a community where everyone knew one another's secrets, where a man's handshake was his oath, and where the Methodist Church was equal parts sanctuary and social hall. Life here was carved out against extremes, blizzards that could bury a barn hole, summers so dry that crops withered in a week. The land forged its people into hard, devout souls, who measured hardship as divine trial, and every blessing as God's reward. The prairie itself inspired such thinking. Golden seas of wheat ran to every horizon, broken only by lonely windmills or stands of cottonwoods marking a stream. The sky was endless by day, vast and blue; by storm, alive with lightning that lit up the emptiness in sudden, merciless flashes. In winter, the wind itself seemed to speak, moaning across the flatland, carrying snow sharp enough to blind and cold, enough to kill a man lost between house and barn. The Blackwoods arrived in this harsh country in the spring of 1872. They had sold their father's farm in Clinton County, Ohio, packed all they owned into 2 wagons, and purchased 640 acres of virgin Kansas land. To their neighbors, they seemed men driven by both opportunity and calling. Ezra, The eldest, at 36, stood tall and broad-shouldered, a man shaped by farm labor, yet possessed of a quiet authority. People remembered his pale, ice-colored eyes most, but of all lies that gave the unnerving impression he could see not just the man before him, but the soul inside. Caleb, 2 years younger, was the planner, the keeper of ledgers, the man who could reckon crop yields, cattle prices, and weather signs with uncanny precision. To him, God's order was revealed in numbers, in symmetry, in the perfect balance of the natural world. Josiah, at 31, was the scholar. 2 years of study at Ohio Wesleyan, before his father's death, had filled him with theology, medicine, and science. His library of more than 200 volumes traveled west with him, turning his room into more of a study than a bedroom. He was the brother who sought answers in scripture and science alike. And then there was Abel, at only 25. The youngest burned with a zeal that often unsettled even his brothers. His faith was raw fire fasts that lasted for days, prayers so fierce they left him trembling, tears that came with every whispered communion with the divine. In Ohav, the faithful had called him touched by the Spirit. In Kansas, that intensity would take on a darker edge. Whispers sometimes hinted that the brothers' devotion had slipped past faith and into something closer to obsession. Unlike their neighbors, who gathered at the modest Methodist church in Towner, plain white structure with a bell tower whose chimes carried across the prairie, the Blackwood brothers built their own house of worship on a ridge that overlooked their land. That first year in Kansas was spent less in planting than in building, for they quarried limestone from the creek bed, felled oak from the boundary grove, and raised a chapel with their own hands. What emerged was as severe as it was sacred, a 30 by 20-foot building of fitted stone, roofed with oak shingles split by hand. Within, the brothers shaped pews from walnut, polished smooth and fitted with joints that showed their patience as craftsmen. The altar bore Hebrew inscriptions Josiah had copied from Scripture, and tall windows on the east and west caught the sun at dawn and dusk, flooding the room with a golden brilliance during their prayers. Each Sunday morning and evening, they conducted their own services under what they called primitive Methodist discipliner, sterner reading of Wesley that leaned on private revelation, direct communion with God, and the priesthood of every believer. Silence often filled their gatherings, punctuated by extended study of Scripture and the testimony of visions or insights. Each brother claimed to receive in the course of the week. Their lives followed the same rigid pattern. For each morning, they rose for an hour of silent prayer in the chapel, greeting the sunrise with individual communion. A breakfast of bread, milk, and fruit followed, and then labor in the fields until midday. Afternoons went to tending animals, mending tools, and maintaining the farms. But night belonged again to their faith-long study, fierce debate over theology, and group prayer that sometimes carried on past midnight. They remained unmarried, devoting themselves wholly to land and creed. Their farmhouse, built in their second year, was plain but stout. its walls hung with wooden plaques engraved with verses meant for both plow and spirit. Bibles lay in nearly every room, worn from use. Alongside other religious texts Josiah deemed worthy of constant reference. By the summer of 1878, the Blackwood farm stood as both a prosperous enterprise and a monument to unwavering conviction. Wheat rippled gold in the wind. Cattle grazed on healthy pastures. The silo brimmed with grain, and the chapel on the hill glimmered with devotion. The brothers had found the independence and religious freedom they sought when leaving Ohio 6 years earlier. Neighbors in Cedar Ridge respected them, though not without unease. Their intensity was unsettling, their isolation puzzling. They were fair in trade, generous in crisis, and tireless in labor. But they avoided gatherings, shunned casual talk, and examined all they met with those sharp blue eyes that seemed to pierce a man's very soul. Their trips to town, every 2 weeks like clockwork, were brief and precise. A list drawn up, supplies purchased, courtesies observed, and then departure without chatter. Children stared at them for men with identical black beards, trimmed and biblical in aspect. The first shadow of illness fell on Cedar Ridge. On July 15th, 1878, it struck like lightning. Sarah Hartman, cheerful keeper of the general store, greeted "Tell you how to customers" that morning with her usual warmth, chatting of the promising wheat harvest. By afternoon she was burning with fever, her skin marked by the rose-colored rash that seasoned doctors recognized as typhoid. Dr. Samuel Morrison, the county's sole physician, came straight from a difficult breech birth at the Henderson farm. He found Sarah delirious, her body aflame with heat that strained the limits of his thermometer. Her husband, Benjamin, usually steady as stone, paced the shop in desperation, wringing his hands, pleading for a miracle. She was well this morning, he kept repeating, voice breaking, laughed at young Tommy's joke, served breakfast. Like always, how can someone go from whole to this in just a few hours? Morrison had encountered typhoid before in his Philadelphia training, but never so sudden, never so merciless. The illness usually crept in over days, allowing at least a grim interval to prepare. But Sarah's case had collapsed the course of the disease into a single day. Fever beyond belief, raving delirium, and a rash that spread across her body in uncanny, symmetrical patterns. Despite all measures, cold compresses, laudanum, careful, watching Sarah Hartman succumbed just after midnight, July 16th. Yet even in death, her case left Morrison unsettled. The stiffness of her body came far too soon. Her skin developed a waxy sheen, as though preserved by some unnatural means rather than beginning the natural course of decay. Even her eyes, which Dr. Morrison had respectfully closed after death, refused to remain shut, springing open each time he pressed the lids down. Within a single day of Sarah's passing, 3 more deaths occurred in Cedar Ridge. The only link between them appeared to be the water drawn from the towns. central well source that had long provided clear, sweet water since the settlement's founding. Yet when Dr. Morrison examined it, he discovered troubling signs. Seepage had breached the carefully laid stonework, tainting the supply. The second victim was Heinrich Zimmermann, a German farmer who had tilled the same fields for 15 years. His illness unfolded with terrifying swiftness, strong health in the morning, high fever by evening, and death before sunrise. Yet his final hours unsettled Dr. Morrison more than Sarah's had. Heinrich began muttering in strange tongues that no one present could identify, words sounding as if they belonged to an age far older than their frontier town, harsh and menacing to the ear. Next came the Patterson twins, Emma and Ellen, two bright 16-year-old pupils considered the pride of the county schoolhouse. Their deaths were doubly tragic, not only for their youth and promise, but for the uncanny symmetry of their passing. They died together, as if some unseen hand had chosen to claim them in unison. Their father, James Patterson, later described how, in their delirium, the girls spoke in absolute harmony, chanting what seemed like prayers. Though the words resembled Latin, the sound was warped, containing syllables the human voice should not have been able to form. By the 1st of August, 14 townsfolk had perished from the strange fever. Dr. Morrison's notes described symptoms that shattered the boundaries of medical science. Each victim succumbed within 24 hours of falling ill. Their fevers reached heights that should have killed them instantly, yet somehow prolonged their agony. And their final hours, marked by eerie speech and wild eyes, looked less like sickness than possession. Panic consumed Cedar Ridge. Families barred their doors, leaving only for dire necessity. The general store, managed by Benjamin Hartman and his brother-in-law, became a place of hushed gossip and fearful glances. The Methodist Church, once the anchor of community life, saw its pews nearly empty. Worshippers, too afraid that gathering might invite the plague into their homes. Dr. Morrison ordered the well sealed and urged everyone to boil their water. Yet the contagion spread in a pattern that could not be explained by common exposure. Entire households were wiped out, while neighbors just across the fence remained untouched. It was in this atmosphere of dread that the Blackwood brothers stepped forward. Until then, they had kept to their farm, as was their habit, shunning unnecessary contact with the town. But on August 10th, Josiah announced that he had received a divine message. "I have prayed for understanding," he told his brothers at supper, "and the Lord has revealed that this plague is not only a trial for the town, but for us as well. We are spared not for our own safety, but to prove ourselves as his chosen instruments. We must meet the trial with faith." True to the brothers' disciplined nature, once the decision was made, it was acted upon swiftly. On August 11th, Josiah went to Cedar Ridge to assist Dr. Morrison in tending the sick. But to his brothers he confided his deeper purpose: to confront disease directly, to invite it upon himself as proof of faith. His first visit was to the home of Thomas Fletcher, the blacksmith, whose young son Timothy had taken ill the night before. The boy's body shook with violent convulsions, his skin blazing with fever. His parents could do nothing but pray beside his bed. Josiah entered quietly, knelt by Timothy, and placed his hands on the boy's burning brow. His prayer was unlike any they had heard before. In a voice that carried with uncanny force through the room, Josiah spoke, "Lord, if this child must suffer by your will, let his burden be laid upon me and my brothers. Let us endure what he cannot, and transform us into whatever you require, that your purpose may be fulfilled. Take his pain, and spare him through our sacrifice." As he prayed, the boy's convulsions slowed. The fever ebbed. Within minutes, Timothy opened his eyes, asking for water and food. His recovery was so sudden that his father collapsed to his knees, weeping in gratitude. Yet many who stood in the room recalled being struck not only by the boy's deliverance, but by what began happening to Josiah himself. His skin grew flushed as though heat coursed through him, and most disturbing of all, the pale blue eyes that marked all the Blackwood brothers now gleamed with motes of shifting gold, glimmering like molten metal. When Josiah finally rose from Timothy's bedside, he moved with the strained composure of someone forcing his body to obey. Dr. Morrison, summoned by the Fletchers to witness what they were calling a miracle, examined both patient and healer. With mounting unease, Timothy showed no sign of the fever that had nearly killed him. Yet Josiah displayed symptoms of the disease accelerating far faster than medicine could account for. Over the next 2 days, Josiah traveled through every afflicted home in Cedar Ridge. At each stop, he laid his hands upon the sick, murmuring prayers that seemed to draw the fever into himself. The results were as astonishing as they were dreadful. The ill rose restored, while Josiah's condition worsened at an alarming pace. By August 13th, when he staggered back to the Blackwood farm, he was burning with a heat that should have ended his life. Still, he insisted all was unfolding by divine design. "This is not illness," he told his worried brothers. "This is cleansing. The Lord strips away what is mortal, so that what remains may endure his eternal work." Within hours, the other 3 Blackwood brothers began to show the same uncanny affliction. Their shared metamorphosis would prove darker than anything Cedar Ridge had yet endured. On August 18th, under a merciless summer sun, Dr. Morrison steered his cart up the dusty track to the Blackwood farm. The prairie grass lay scorched by drought. The sky wavered with heat, and the farmhouse shimmered like a mirage. But anomalies soon caught his eye. The brothers' wheat stood impossibly green despite weeks without rain, and their cattle appeared fat and thriving while herds across the county grew gaunt. Ezra, the eldest, opened the farmhouse door. His appearance stunned Morrison. The man's skin was translucent, revealing a lattice of vessels beneath. Yet the blood within them glowed not, red but golden, pulsing with a rhythm of its own. His voice, when he spoke, carried both command and resonance, vibrating in Morrison's chest. "We have awaited you, Doctor. Our change nears completion. You must be witness, so that others will one day understand." Inside, The four brothers were positioned with geometric precision, as though arranged by design, alive, breathing, moving, watching, but no longer wholly human. Morrison recorded later in his journal, Ezra's temperature reached 107, yet he speaks coherently. Caleb's pulse is almost imperceptible, but he walks with ease. Josiah breathes once every few minutes without distress. Abel's skin is cold, though he burns with fever. Caleb's transformation displayed itself most through his skin. The fever's rose spots had formed intricate patterns, shifting into shapes resembling equations drawn in blood. As Morrison looked on, they rearranged themselves as though his body were a living chalkboard. The calculations resolve, Caleb intoned, his voice harmonizing eerily with Ezra's matter and spirit. Time and eternity, mortal and divine, converging, we embody proofs mankind has not yet written. Josiah, ever the scholar, bore words upon his flesh. His skin resembled aged parchment, inscribed in Hebrew, Greek, Latin, and other shifting characters Morrison could not place. His voice echoed impossibly, seeming to come from every corner of the room at once. Doctor, your medicine cannot contain what we have seen. We are preserving these revelations, that those yet to come may grasp the truth of our transformation. But was Abel, the youngest, who struck Morrison deepest. His entire form radiated a gentle, unnatural light that filled the farmhouse with its glow. It was neither harsh nor blinding, but undeniably unearthly. A cold, bluish-white light seemed to radiate from Abel's very bones, as though his body itself had become a lantern. His eyes glowed without iris or pupil, twin points of starlight blazing in a human face. We no longer depend on food for life, Abel told Dr. Morrison, his voice carrying both within the room and from some vast, echoing distance. Our strength comes from sources unknown to human science. We are crossing the threshold, no longer bound to the mortal state, but not yet eternal. Morrison tried to record his observations, but the brothers resisted. They declared their condition a divine sign, proof that God had chosen them as vessels purified by fire for his work. Yet Morrison's medical training saw something far less holy. Their symptoms matched no disease, and the changes seemed too uniform to be natural. He began to suspect a contaminant-tainted well water, or spoiled grain from their silo. The town's reaction fractured. Reverend Marcus Thorne and his followers called the brothers' survival miraculous, and pilgrims began flocking to Blackwood farm, desperate for a glimpse of heaven's power. But others, especially those who had buried loved ones during the epidemic, looked upon the brothers with dread. "It ain't right," grumbled Jacob Steinberg, who had lost his wife and 2 children in a week. "Why them and not decent folk? That ain't no blessing. That's something wrong, something that makes my skin crawl." Their behavior only deepened the unease. The brothers still worked their land, but with a strange, synchronized rhythm, as if they spoke silently among themselves. Neighbors claimed to see them standing motionless in their wheat fields, faces tilted toward the heavens as though listening to an unseen voice. Even their chapel had changed. Once a private place of worship, now their nightly prayers carried across the prairie. The harmony was hauntingly beautiful, but inhuman, for voices weaving patterns no ordinary throat could produce. Eleanor Patterson, who lived nearby, later confessed to Morrison, "I went to see for myself, got within 50 yards of the chapel, and felt something pushing me back. Not a hand, but something inside my head. Doctor, those boys are changed. By, and not by anything natural." By late summer, Cedar Ridge's typhoid outbreak had faded. The poisoned well was sealed, new water secured, and life crept back toward normalcy. But on the Blackwood farm, the mystery deepened. Morrison visited weekly, officially to observe, privately to document the impossible. What he recorded strained the limits of reason. Ezra's body temperature had leveled at 106.7 degrees. Yet he showed no fever damage, no seizures, no organ failure. His eyes now gleamed like molten gold, swirling with light. When he spoke, his voice bent listeners to agreement, no matter how illogical his words. Dr. Ezra said during one exam, "You measure us with tools built for ordinary flesh, but we have left such limits behind. Your science cannot yet reach the principles that sustain us." Caleb's rose-colored blotches had grown into intricate designs resembling ancient alphabets. Morrison sent sketches to scholars, but none recognized bemarkings. Stranger still, the patterns shifted across Caleb's skin, rearranging themselves every few days. When Morrison attempted to draw blood, what flowed was not red, but a thick golden liquid that moved with intent as, if alive, our circulation is redesigned. Caleb remarked with an almost playful calm, "This current carries not only breath and nourishment, but also knowledge energy that belongs to realms beyond matter." Josiah's voice had shed all humanity. His words resonated everywhere at once, vibrating in the air until Morrison felt dizzy. And Josiah's skin was alive with writing. Sentences appeared and reshaped themselves as Morrison watched, narrating his thoughts with unnerving precision. "We are becoming living books," Josiah intoned, his dissonant voice sending Morrison's head spinning. "Repositories of knowledge, human and divine alike. Truth is inscribed into our very flesh." Abel's glow had grown so strong he could light a darkened room without flame. Yet his most disturbing gift was perception, sensing things no human. Sure, no, gazing past the veil of ordinary sight into realms Morrison could not name. He could foretell changes in the weather days before they arrived, locate misplaced objects without searching, and somehow sensed visitors approaching the farm long before they could be seen on the road. During one of Dr. Morrison's examinations, Abel displayed perceptions that defied all human understandings. Without glancing inside, he named every item in Morrison's medical bag. He described, with astonishing accuracy, the condition of horses stabled half a mile away, and even recounted conversations taking place in Cedar Ridge, 3 miles distant. "Our senses have been opened to realms hidden from ordinary men," Abel explained, his star-like eyes radiating an impossible warmth despite their alien brilliance. We can see across distances no I should reach. We can hear sounds carried on frequencies beyond the limits of human hearing. The brothers' collective manner had altered as well, reflecting a unity that surpassed normal kinship. They moved with uncanny precision, as if sharing a single mind, often finishing each other's sentences or answering unspoken thoughts. Their need for food and sleep dwindled until they survived on little more than half the nourishment of common men, and no more than a few hours of rest each night. Most troubling of all were their proclamations of divine communication. They spoke of visions foretelling the fate of their neighbors' prophecies of approaching calamities and insisted they were being instructed to prepare the community for some unnamed catastrophe. They began recording these revelations in a leather-bound volume, written in a script unlike any language Morrison or anyone else had ever seen. At first, the townspeople regarded the brothers with fascination, but curiosity soon gave way to dread. Children were kept from wandering near the Blackwood land, and grown men and women crossed themselves when the brothers appeared in town. Even the Methodist Church, which had once celebrated their survival as a miracle, turned wary. Reverend Thorne, who had once praised them for their faith, now whispered with unease. "I fear," he confessed to Dr. Morrison, "that in their zeal to serve the Lord, they have opened themselves to powers not wholly of heaven. There is something in their gazer knowledge that no mortal should carry." By October of 1878, the transformation at Blackwood Farm had advanced beyond the point of denial. The brothers no longer seemed fully human, though they remained lucid, eloquent, and disturbingly confident in their condition. They insisted they had been purified, chosen as vessels to stand between man and the divine. Morrison's records of their case grew increasingly frantic. His journal betrayed a man fighting to preserve his scientific sanity while witnessing phenomena that shattered every principle of medicine. He reached out to colleagues in Kansas City and Chicago, but their replies only deepened his despair. "No physician I have contacted has seen anything akin to the Blackwood case," he wrote. "Their symptoms contradict human physiology itself. Yet my own eyes cannot deny what I see. I question whether I am losing my reason or whether medicine has yet to glimpse the true frontiers of human existence." The breaking point came on October 15th, when little Sarah Preston vanished while playing near the Blackwood property. 3 hours later, her frantic parents found her seated calmly inside the brothers' chapel, her face aglow with serenity. She claimed the brothers had shown her marvelous visions of heaven, revealed secrets too wondrous to speak aloud. But when Dr. Morrison examined her, he discovered her temperature had risen to 103 degrees, and her eyes had begun to shift into the same golden radiance that afflicted Ezra, terrified. Sarah's parents begged Morrison to act. "You must stop this," Thomas Preston pleaded. "Those men, or whatever they've become, passing their curse to our children. My little girl speaks of joining them, of doing their holy work. She knows things no child of 7 should know." Morrison confirmed that Sarah had indeed been altered by her contact with the brothers. Her fever bore no resemblance to typhoid. poor any known ailment, and her behavior had changed beyond recognition. She spoke with unnatural wisdom, displayed knowledge of medicine and theology beyond her years, and her skin carried the same faint glow that marked Abel, haunted by the thought that the brother's condition might spread like a contagion. Morrison made a choice that would torment him for the rest of his life. He alerted the Kansas State Medical Board and the regional health authorities, demanding immediate action. Yet, when officials arrived, their investigation left them so shaken that they chose silence over truth. Dr. James Patterson, the state medical examiner, remained at the Blackwood farm for 3 days. His official report, locked away by order of the board, was deemed too dangerous for public release. But years later, Patterson's private letters to his wife came to light. "I have seen things," he wrote, "that overturn not only medicine's understanding of disease, but the very foundations of life itself. The Blackwood brothers are neither wholly alive nor truly dead. They exist in an intermediate state that science cannot name and dare not acknowledge." The community's growing terror soon reached a breaking point. Families awoke to find their children missing from their beds, only to discover them hours later, standing in the moonlit fields surrounding the Blackwood chapel. The children remembered nothing of how they had arrived there, but each returned changed, speaking with strange wisdom and bearing abilities their parents found horrifying. And just when the townsfolk thought the horror in Cedar Ridge had reached its peak, they realized it had only begun. Hit that like button to support our channel, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of our future stories. Now, let's uncover what happened next. On October 25th, Mayor William Harrison gathered the townsfolk of Cedar Ridge by an urgent meeting, one many residents believed could decide the fate of the community. Nearly every adult was present, and the debate revealed a stark divide. Some insisted the Blackwood brothers were chosen instruments of healing, while others believed them to be a dangerous presence, threatening the very soul of the town. Dr. Morrison was asked to give his professional judgment, though his testimony did little to calm the crowd. Instead, it unsettled them further. He explained that the brothers' state could not be found anywhere in medical texts. Their bodies functioned in ways outside human norms, yet they showed no illness. Their strength and awareness exceeded natural boundaries, but they remained entirely lucid. Their vital signs defy what we understand as life, Morrison confessed. But they suffer no pain, no decline. This is neither sickness nor progress. It is something altogether new, something beyond the human condition. By the close of the meeting, a fateful decision had been made. A delegation of leaders would confront the Blackwoods and deliver an ultimatum. They must either undo what had happened to them or leave Cedar Ridge for good. The chosen representatives were Mayor Harrison, Reverend Thorne, Thomas Preston, and Dr. Morrison himself. The brothers would be given 1 week to respond. On November 1st, 1878, under a heavy gray sky that pressed down like a warning of winter, the committee set out for the Blackwood farm. Each man was silent, weighed down by thoughts of the coming confrontation. From a distance, the homestead looked ordinary, but as they drew near, strange details betrayed its transformation. The wheat fields still stood golden and full, untouched by the harvest season. Cattle grazed with eerie precision, their movements forming deliberate patterns that seemed geometric when viewed from above. Most unsettling of all was the limestone chapel on the hill. It glowed faintly even in daylight, and from within came sounds not of hymns, but of something far richer, layered, and alien to human ears. When they knocked at the farmhouse, the door was opened by young Sarah Preston. Her presence froze her father in shock. Though she looked well, her golden-flecked eyes and translucent skin betrayed the same change seen in the brothers. "Hello, Papa," she greeted softly, her voice carrying a strange harmonic undertone. "They've been expecting you." The brothers, Pa, are in the chapel, ready to answer your question. The walk up the hill felt like crossing into another reality. The ground trembled faintly beneath their steps, and the air shimmered with shifting patterns of light, cool against the skin, though. It looked like heat waves. Birds overhead flew in impossible formations, arranging and rearranging themselves into precise symbols as the men climbed inside the chapel. The four Blackwood brothers stood in a perfect square around the altar. Their transformation had advanced beyond anything the visitors could have imagined. Their skin had grown entirely transparent, revealing inner structures that no longer resembled human anatomy, while their golden eyes seemed to hold endless depths. When they spoke, it was as one. "Welcome," Ezra said, though the voice issued from all four simultaneously. "We know why you are here. You fear us, and you fear what our change means for your town. These fears are not without reason." Mayor Resson then delivered the ultimatum. The brothers must return to their former selves or leave Cedar Ridge forever. The uncertainty their presence caused could no longer be endured, Caleb answered, his words blending seamlessly with Ezra's. "Mr. Mayor, what you ask cannot be done. Butterfly cannot become a caterpillar again. We have stepped beyond the limits of humanity, and there is no path that leads back." Reverend Thorne tried to appeal to faith, warning that their altered state was a violation of God's design. He quoted scripture about the sanctity of mankind's natural form and the peril of pursuing forbidden knowledge. But Josiah's reply seemed to shake the very air. His words echoed from unseen dimensions, light rippling across the chapel walls as he spoke. "Reverend," he said, "you speak as though God's design is fixed, but the scriptures themselves promise transformation. Humanity was always meant to ascend beyond what it is now. We are not defying God's will. We are fulfilling it. We have merely uncovered the road that leads toward the promised change." Dr. Morrison attempted to frame the matter in clinical terms, insisting that the brothers' growing sway over the townsfolk posed a danger to public health. Yet their reply exposed how inadequate the language of medicine was for describing their condition. "Doctor," said Abel, his body glowing with an inner radiance that spilled shifting beams across the chapel walls, "you have recorded our state with commendable precision. But your methods belong to a world we no longer inhabit. You judge us by standards meant for ordinary flesh, but we are no longer bound by such limits. The tension shifted when Thomas Preston rose, abandoning the theological debates and intellectual sparring. His anguish as a father cut through all abstractions. "I don't care about theories," he cried, voice raw with desperation. "I care about my child. She was laughing and carefree before she met you. Now she speaks with knowledge no child should have. And when she looks at me, it feels as though her eyes pierce my very soul. I want my little girl back." The brothers responded with compassion, yet their words carried the weight of inevitability. They explained that Sarah's change had not begun with her visits to the chapel, but months earlier, when Josiah had prayed over young Timothy Fletcher. That prayer had opened a door that could never again be shut. "Thomas," said Ezra gently, his voice like a balm, "your daughter is not lost. She is unfolding into a form that will serve purposes greater than anything she could have reached as an ordinary child. The bond of your love will remain, even as she grows beyond the narrow categories of human life." But it was Sarah herself who brought clarity. The girl stepped forward, her voice calm and luminous with a certainty beyond her years. "Papa Mayor Harrison, Reverend Thorne, Dr. Morrison," she said, "you keep asking whether what is happening to us is good or bad, safe or dangerous, right or wrong. But those words don't belong here. We're not better or worse than we were. We are different in ways that make such comparisons meaningless." The brothers then proposed to demonstrate. They promised proof that their change was an enlargement of being, not a loss. Curiosity overcame Dr. Morrison's dread, and he agreed. They formed a circle and began what they called a bridge of awareness, drawing the delegation into their expanded perception. For minutes that stretched into hours, Morrison's mind touched the brothers' perspective. He felt the thoughts and emotions of every soul in Cedar Ridge, witnessed events unfolding far away, and saw hidden links between things that had seemed unconnected. Exhilaration and terror mingled, as he realized human consciousness was never meant to contain such immensity. When the vision ended, he was forever altered. He knew with certainty that reality was far vaster than science admitted, but also that some knowledge was too immense for mortal minds. Each member of the delegation staggered under the strain of the experience, suffering disorientation as their minds tried to shrink back into normal shape. Later, Morrison sought answers in his laboratory. The blood samples he had taken from the brothers revealed horrors no textbook could explain. Instead of ordinary cells, he found structures swollen, multinucleated, and disturbingly purposeful. The blood itself seemed alive, coordinating its own movements as if possessed by thought. "Their blood thinks," Morrison scribbled with trembling hand. "Not a vessel of life, but life itself, conscious and deliberate." He realized then that the brothers had not survived typhoid fever at all. They had been remade by it. The sickness had triggered some hidden adaptation, reshaping their bodies into something that hovered between the realms of life and death. The Blackwoods did not deny it. They confessed their transformation was intentional, rooted in esoteric studies. Josiah's prayer over Timothy had been no spontaneous plea, but a ritual invoking a covenant that demanded surrender of flesh in exchange for union with the eternal. "We are not dying," Caleb declared. "This body is only a husk. We are emerging as something greater." They spoke of others across history who had walked the same path. Vessels refined to prepare mankind for an approaching upheaval. To Morrison, it became clear they now existed outside any category science could recognize, not alive in the common sense, yet not dead either, suspended in an impossible state. "You could join us," Abel urged, his glowing skin pulsing like a living beacon. "Your mind would not be diminished but expanded." But Morrison recoiled. Faced with the abyss, he chose the frailty of ordinary humanity. Fleeing the chapel in terror, he drove through the night, consumed by dread. His departure from Cedar Ridge was the beginning of the end. Unable to bear the weight of what he had seen, he consigned his notes to the flames, destroyed every record, and abandoned Kansas forever. He eventually settled in Oregon, practicing medicine for another 3 decades. Yet never once did he speak of the Blackwood affair. The brothers themselves seemed to realize that their presence no longer belonged among ordinary people. In the weeks after Morrison's departure, they withdrew completely from the community. The chapel, once lit like a beacon across the prairie, fell into darkness. The strange, otherworldly hymns that had carried on the night air ceased. On December 15, 1878, Thomas Preston stumbled upon the first body. Ezra lay within the chapel, his altered flesh deteriorating in ways that defied every natural law. His golden eyes had hardened into glass, and his skin looked like cracked parchment. There was no wound, no illness, he had simply stopped being. The remaining brothers were found soon after, each in a different place on the farm. Caleb lay in the wheat fields, surrounded by stalks that had grown overnight into towering walls of impossible height. Josiah was discovered seated at his desk in the farmhouse library, a pen frozen in his hand above a blank sheet of paper. Abel was found in the barn, his skin still giving off a dim, ghostly glow. The Methodist Church acted quickly, insisting on a quiet burial in the chapel cemetery. No examinations, no causes of death. No ceremony beyond names and dates carved into plain stones. The incident was never spoken of again in any official capacity, yet the mystery endured. The farm was deserted, the chapel crumbled, but travelers swore that eerie lights still rose from the hilltop and voices strange, harmonious voices drifted on the wind during moonless nights. The Kansas State Medical Board sealed its files on the matter, where they remain locked away. Dr. Patterson's recommendation that the case be suppressed for the protection of science and public health was followed without protest. The official record blandly declared that the Blackwood brothers had died of typhoid fever, dismissing every other account as panic induced by the epidemic. In 1923, Developers purchased the abandoned property with plans to build a new town. But workers soon refused to continue after reporting visions, dread, and night terrors near the ruins. The project collapsed, and the land was later handed over to the state as a wildlife preserve. Though locals know that environmental concerns are not the true reason, no one is allowed inside. The Blackwood brothers' story did not end with their graves. Their strange transformation raised questions about the essence of life and death, about the possibility of transcendence through surrender, questions too unsettling for science to acknowledge. If what happened to them was real, then our understanding of biology and consciousness is incomplete at its core. Perhaps some mysteries remain sealed, not because proof is absent, but because their answers are unbearable. The brothers sought communion with the divine, but in abandoning their humanity, they opened themselves to forces that remade them into something neither fully alive nor fully dead. Their chapel stands silent now, its doors barred, its windows dark but on certain nights, when the air is still and the sky is black. Wanderers speak of seeing 4 pale figures in the wheat, faces tilted upward as if listening to a voice carried from another world. The Blackwood case reminds us that some thresholds, once crossed, can never be undone. The brothers may have found a passage beyond life, but their humanity was the price. Their tale is less a miracle than a warning. That knowledge pursued too far may shatter the seeker, and that the boundary between man and divinity is far thinner and far more perilous than we dare to admit. So what do you believe? Was the truth revealed, or does the Blackwood mystery still hide more than it shows? Share your thoughts below. And if stories of haunted places and forbidden transformations intrigue you, make sure to subscribe, ring the bell, and pass this tale along to fellow seekers of dark wonders. The truth is out there, but only the brave will choose to face it.